Okay, comfortable at all? Okay. Yeah, if I did this to John, our patient that's normally out here, he would probably try to hit me in the face. Because his nerve is right there. Perpendicular to the axis of the arm.
Straight or bent?
And that is right like that. Do that. Which is 16 and a half. And then there's a diagonal, which is going to be cubital fold over the electron, which is going to be 17 and a half. Let's see. Circumference proximal to that condyles. You can do this. Definitely need this and one higher up if you're going to do tricep scuff. You're going to do about a 2% reduction. It's between 2 and 6% reduction on these patients. More fleshy patient, you're going to do 6. Less fleshy patient, you're going to do 2. We're probably 2 to 3% on him. I don't want it to be too tight, so I'm probably going to go with like a 2% reduction. 1 inch from the distal end. We're looking at 21.6, 2 inches, 23.5, and 3 inches, 25.5. The other arm size, because we still need to make you a new deal there too. So. All right, lateral epicondyle to wrist is going to be 30 centimeters. I think that's on there.
Epicondyle is a styloid?
Yep, there you go. I should probably.
Styloid to thumb tip.
14.
Middle finger?
8.
Circumference at the wrist?
16 and a half.
Mid-forearm?
Mid-forearm. Okay. 15 and a half.
Cubital fold?
We got, well, I got that on the other side, but
MCP?
yeah, it's 29 and then MCP. MCP is probably the most important one. 90% of the things you're going to order are an actual MCP measurement. Do have them relax their hand, don't squeeze this tight. 22. Stuff. You don't have to think too much. Okay, so that's the apex of epicondyle on either side. So the width at the epicondyles is 6 point. Come on now. 6.6. You can use just an ml gauge to check this and put that in for your own reference. But I'm going to mark this with my fingers, but you need to know that you can get at least a half an inch of purchase over the top. Typically, it's going to be over the medial epicondyles where you find you get the most. Pronation and supination, you get a nice ml out towards the end to figure out how tight you need to make it to keep pronation and supination. Okay. On him, we're not going to be as worried about that, but I am going to just try to mold it in a little bit to maintain so it doesn't rotate on us. Sticking my thumb up while they're taking this cast, otherwise it comes out crooked, and that's never good. Don't wrap circumferentially. If you wrap circumferentially, you'll screw up your mold. So,
Because of roping or?
actually, and it'll bridge in a lot of places. Now, this is surgical tubing. This is what you use to cast BEs, okay? It's just really super flimsy. This is going to stick to the plaster really, really well. So you won't have to worry about weird stuff because the plaster doesn't ink out of the way. Okay. Hold on there. It's figure of 8 on this. I'm gonna come over. I just don't want this thing to slide down or take any kicks. All right. Hard part's not forgetting to do something because I'm talking and stuff. So go ahead and bend your elbow to right there. That's the easiest way to mark that lateral epicondyle. Now I'm going to mark it all the way down to the end of the radial head. So I just have this nice big circle right over both. Because I also can't put an electron over the radial head, but I'm going to want to put one just distal to it. So your electrodes are going to end up over there if you're going myoleptic. I'm going to mark the epicondyle posterior all the way around to the anterior. Got that whole thing marked. Medial epicondyle. And around. It is a lot closer to the olecranon, so you will notice that when you do those. If I'm doing a suspension where I have to get down into the cubital fold, I'm going to have them fire their biceps. So from their biceps, I'm going to feel the biceps tendon, and I'm going to mark either side of it. Those things good and relax. Distal radius, distal ulna. Not too worried about that because I'm going to keep you from hitting down there anyway. So now my trim lines. I'm going to go ahead and put how high I'm going to wrap my plaster so that I don't short myself plastered. You will short yourself plaster every time. I'm going to mark about 1.5 inches above the epicondyle, about the same above the apex of the olecranon, and I'm just going to go ahead and mark those on so I don't miss getting enough plaster in those areas. So now I'm not going to be short on my plaster. This is where you really want to make sure they're not sensitive somewhere. Got my plaster up to my mark. Because I need about 1 inch worth of coverage over the top, so if I take my plaster up about 1.5 inches, it should be pretty good. Because as soon as I go to squeeze this, it's going to draw back in. That plaster is going to draw down back towards that arm. Hand holds. This hand, index finger, and my thumb, I'm going to find, well, I'm going to have to go with my middle finger because his arm's a little bigger. I'm going to find epicondyles. I'm going to go anterior, proximal to the epicondyles, and I'm going to squeeze in with just the tips of my fingers. So the bone structure, this nice solid triceps, basically triceps tendon pressure that will be perpendicular to my anterior opening of the socket. This is what holds this socket on. You know you've done this right if while you're holding on to the patient and they try to pull out and come off. Guess what I now have? Self-suspending socket, and I'm not having to modify to gain this. I'm putting it into the cast to start with. So I know that if I can do this on him when I fit him with an arm, it ain't gonna go anywhere either. This is fairly comfortable. Not squeezing too hard at all. Okay. I'm going to make a line that goes to the 50% mark on this arm. And we're going to mold this in right in here. Okay. And I'm drawing that tissue, pulling the tissue in and creating a pooch in the anterior. That's going to make a little relief as we go around. You can see I'm already creating that anterior trim line with that flare. So now we're setting enough that I can go ahead and put the specialist on top. I've already marked all my marks. I should be able to wrap this in, and it's going to make that set. Again, same wrap. If at this point you found that you shorted yourself with some plaster, you can wrap a little higher.
When you did your handhold, what degrees were you aiming for? 90?
45 with him.
45?
Yeah. We work this in. But what I'm doing by doing this is I'm keeping from having a big pooch over the ML, over those epicondyles, because otherwise you end up with a big gap where your electrodes are supposed to go. So really squeezing that anterior, or that tissue towards the anterior is gonna help with that. The book, I think, says that you end up with a 12 millimeter flare around the anterior trim line of a traditional Northwestern style. I'm actually shooting for really that old Northwestern style socket, but with some of the benefits of like the ACC style pressure system. So this really keeps that arm down in there. The nice thing is, since I'm molding this as I go, I know it's comfortable, at least in those areas. I'm not pushing directly over top of the bone uncomfortably in the back, or in this area on the sides, because I need a downward pressure on the radius and the ulna in this area to keep that arm down in it. I'm gonna leave this open so the muscle bulges through the back, but that pressure from here against this is what's holding this arm in. So it's an AP pressure, but it's using ML compression. So some of the same things that you gain from like a Munster style, but without all the frustration of tissue containment on the front. And then I love this. It's always a nice touch, right? That's really pretty well set. So the other thing that this stuff does is it makes it a lot easier to pull these off, especially if you've managed to get yourself a good suction fit, which this you can get a pretty good suction fit until you cut the anterior out. If you want a true suction fit, you can actually take this, and then when you do your modification, instead of forming this, you put your fingers down in here and you get the biceps tendon, and you have them fire their muscle, and you'll pooch out this little bit here, and then you're going to add to it. So that's how this is very similar to how you would do if you were going to contain all the way to the top. The big difference is you're going to go down into the fold there, but you will get those stuck on if you don't do this as two-stage like we'll do next. This is still not going to be the easiest thing to get off, and I want to feel as it's coming off if we've got a problem. You feel how much easier that was? Yeah. Your arm is in much better shape. Now the cool thing is, when we look at this, if you compare that to those Nexo sockets,